This is Beowulf Screencast Part 2, and we're going to be talking about the beginning of the poem and working our way through that first section of Beowulf as a young warrior when he goes um, to fight Grendel and Grendel's mom for the Danish people. And so we kind of are skipping like the prologue at the very beginning. It's basically kind of like this guy had a son, and this king had a son, he became the king, and this guy had a son, and then he became the king, and it goes on and on and on there in the prologue. But at the very end, it comes down to, and this is not a part that I had you read, I'm just kind of summing it up, and it talks about the king Hrothgar, who is going to become the the king of the Danish people, which is the beginning of Beowulf's story. And so Hrothgar, it said that the fortunes of war favored Hrothgar, and so he was a much beloved king. People joined his ranks, and everybody wanted to swear their fealty to him. And he was a good king. He was a gift giver, and he had decided that what he wanted to pay back the goodness of his people by building them a hall, a mead hall, which was for the purposes of having celebrations and for him to give gifts and to both young and old. And so he constructs the mightiest hall that had ever been built. It was beautiful and it was awe inspiring. And he called it Harrowit. And he, for years and years, in this hall, he held celebrations with his people and he gave them gifts and all of that. And so that is where our story where we're going to pick up with the story with the attack of Harrowit by the monster Grendel. Okay, so the monster Grendel, he didn't like noise. Like it would make him very angry to hear these people and they're always celebrating and having a good time, and he didn't like that sound. He didn't like the sound that they made, and it would drive him into a rage. Um, and so this powerful demon, this prowler through the dark, he hates these celebrations, and so one night after sitting and trying to, probably he was trying to sleep. I mean, I know how I get if my sleep is interrupted by somebody partying, at the house next door or whatever. So he is tired of listening to people singing and the harp and the poet talking and everybody's laughing and having a good time and they're celebrating. And so he decides that he is done with them. He's finished. You're done. And so he is going to make his way from the moors where he lived to the Hall of Harrowit. And so he created havoc in this first visit. He rushes in and snatches up men from their resting places and takes them back to his lair. So this first night, he grabs 30 men and he blunders back with the butchered corpses to his den out on the moors. This continues night after night after night until Grendel is the ruler of Harrowit. And for 12 long winters, um, the hall of Harrowit is going to sit empty because people are frightened and afraid to stay there. Um, 12 long winters, 12 seasons of woe. He is the new ruler in this Danish kingdom. And so obviously this is really distressing to the king Hrothgar, and tells the news spreads far and wide about the monster Grendel and his rule over the heroine. They sing all these sad songs about the king and all these things, and so that's where we end with this section. Okay, so way over the sea in Gateland, the young warrior Beowulf hears about the tales of Hrothgar and of Grendel and the history that they have. And when he hears about him, he knows that, it is up to him who is the mightiest man on earth, obviously. He's highborn and powerful. He orders a boat that's going to sail the waves, and his plan is to sail over the ocean to find the king who needed a defender and to take care of the monster Grendel for Hrothgar. And so he takes 14 men. the best that he could find, and boards the boat, and they sail across until they reach the other side. And when they get there, they see a messenger or a watchman up on the hill, and he's like, "Hey, what are y'all doing here?" And when he finds out what Beowulf's purpose is, he immediately takes him to see King Hrothgar. And Hrothgar has heard of Beowulf. He actually knew him when he was a little kid. He's like, I knew Beowulf when he was a young child. He comes from this great family, and um, I've heard about all of his victories, and he's like, bring him in, of course. Like, let's hear what he has to say. And so he Beowulf comes in, and he kind of starts with his resume, right? He talks about all the things that he's already accomplished. He's already been all made all these victories, and he was like, greetings. When I was young, I had great trumps. I've beat a nest of trolls and sea brutes and 5 monsters with my awesome strength. Yeah, he used the word awesome. And then he states his purpose. He means to be a match for the monster Grendel. And he says, I mean to be a match for Grendel, settle the outcome in single combat. And so my request, O King of Bright Danes, is that you won't refuse me, who have come this far, the privilege of purifying Harrowit with my own men to help me and nobody else. And not only does he plan to defeat Grendel, he plans to do it in like man-to-man combat. So he says, I hereby renounce sword and shelter of the broad shield, the war-heavy board. Hand to hand is how it will be, a life and death fight with a fiend. Okay, and so then he talks about it's whoever wins and loses, it's deemed that way by God. So if Grendel wins, it's going to be a gruesome day, and then if I win, you know, it's all God's plan, right? So Hrothgar says, bet. And then they begin to party because, no good story is not, a good story without a couple of parties, right? So they have this great feast, and they sing songs, and they drink and celebrate until late into the evening. And then they're telling stories, and Beowulf puts an end to the celebration and sends everybody out of Harrowitz so that he and his men can prepare for the fight. Okay, so we have I'm going to skip past the feast. I just summed that up for you. The feast. Okay, so, the fight. So Hrothgar leaves. He takes his wife. He takes all of his people. They move to like higher ground, so they'll be safe from the battle. And only Beowulf and his 14 men are left inside the hall. And so, way out on the moors, of course, Grendel has heard their celebrations. He's like, oh, these people dare to have celebrations. I thought I've got rid of all this. And so he comes greedily loping. The shadow stalker, the god cursed Grendel, comes across the moors. And the men are inside the heroine. They're inside there. And everybody is asleep except for one man. And of course, that man is Beowulf, you guessed it. And so Grendel comes and he rips the door off the hinges. Okay? He rips the doors off the hinges into the hall, and he comes bursting forward, and he's excited because there are so many men in the hall for the first time. So he's like, yeah, I'm going to have a party tonight. And so he grabs, it's feast time. He grabs the first man that he can get a hold of. And I love this. I gotta find it right here because I'm kind of like skimming and talking at the same time. Hold on, greedily looping, Grindel. Oh, here it is. Nor did the creature keep him waiting, but struck suddenly and started in. He grabbed and mauled a man on his bench, bit into his bone lappings, bolted down his blood, and gorged on him in lumps, leaving the body utterly lifeless, eaten up hand and foot. Okay, so he is like swallowed whole, right? Everything. And so then he reaches out for the next man, and it's Beowulf, right? So he raises his arm. It says he was bearing in with open claw when the alert heroes come back in arm lock, forestalled him utterly. He's reaching in with his massive claw, and Beowulf reaches up and stops his advance with his hand. Okay? Um, and normally we would just be like, "Whoa," okay. But this dude has like the strength of 30 men in each hand. That's like a total combined fighting power of 60 men, right? And I didn't make that up. It's in the story. And so Beowulf reaches up, he grabs, and Grendel, for the first time in his life, is a little bit frightened, right? Because he discovers that is held in a hand grip, and it says harder than anything he had ever encountered in any man on the face of the earth. Every bone in his body quailed and recoiled, but he could not escape. He was desperate to flee to his den and hide with the devil's litter, for in all his days he had never been clamped or cornered like this. Never has happened to him before. Okay? Tries to escape. He can't. Beowulf jumps up to his feet, gets a better grip, and the two begin arm wrestling. Okay? Literally up and down this great hall. Grendel's trying to get away. Beowulf is bearing down. They're smashing things and breaking benches. And Grendel is screaming and howling. Y'all, he is screaming so loud that people like in the next town can hear him wailing, and they're trembling with fear, right? Because they can hear it happening. And this den that they're making, smashing these benches, it's like an earthquake. It's very, very scary. Okay, so Beowulf's men, they jump in to help. They're like gonna avenge their king and their leader and help him out. And they're stabbing and slicing at Grendel with their swords. But what they don't know is that no blade on earth, no blacksmith's art could ever damage the demon opponent. Their swords do them absolutely no good. And so Beowulf was right in his assessment that he needed to use hand-to-hand combat. So, back to the fight. So they're still fighting, right? And so Beowulf is, as hard as Grendel is trying to get away, Beowulf is bearing down on him, and he's got him still locked in this grip. And the monster, Grendel, is in massive pain at this point, right? His whole body is in pain, and a wound opens up on his shoulder, right? And the sinew starts splitting, the bone lappings burst, and literally Beowulf separates Grendel's arm from his body, and which obviously Grendel runs away from the hole. But it's a death sentence, right? They didn't have like ERs or anything there. So, and I'm sure a monster couldn't go to one, even if they did. So he's gonna skulk back off to the moors where he's gonna die, because now he has no arm and blood is probably shooting all over the place. So Beowulf has been victorious. He takes the trophy, which is the great shoulder and arm and claw of Grendel, and hangs it high under the roof of Harroway for all the roof to see. So you guessed it, they're going to have another party to celebrate Beowulf's victory. Somebody sings a song. It takes up over 100 lines. Everybody's happy, and the people decide that it's safe to start sleeping in the hall once again. Now that the threat is over, which is totally a rookie mistake, right? So, way out on the moors, Grendel's mom, and no, y'all, never had a kid. You don't even know what it's like for a mother to like nobody's gonna mess with my babies. I can't even imagine what it would be like if somebody killed my baby. So, like I'm talking like mom is angry. Mom, you thought Grendel was bad. Mom is worse, right? So Grendel's mom is lamenting the loss of her son. She's desperate for revenge. So I love this. She sallies forth, right? Sally ho, tally ho, tally ho, Sally ho. Sally's forth on her savage journey. She bursts into Harrowit where everybody's sleeping because they thought the threat was over and they could sleep there again. And she snatches up, and she has to pick this one, of course, because then the story would probably have ended. But she snatches up Lord Hrothgar's favorite dude. Okay, his name was a Share. He was Lord Hrothgar's most loved man. She snatches him up, and she takes Grendel's arm and she retreats back to her den. And of course, Lord Hrothgar is so upset, right? Because his most loved man is gone. And there's no way to, somebody's got to avenge the loss of this man. We're talking about that Bergild again, right? So he calls upon Beowulf one more time and says, dude, I need your help. One more time. I know the last time you thought that was the last time, but this is the last time for real. And if you do, I'm going to give you all this money and wealth. And we'll pick up there in the next screencast.